this is what Trump wants. He wants a right-wing, populist, illiberal democracy based on the style of Viktor Orban. And that may sound crazy today, but check back in 6 months and let's see if Trump is cracking down on press freedoms or prosecuting his enemies or limiting the power of the courts or ramming through anti-democratic measures, because that's what we're facing in America. And I can't say it often enough.
Today, the world shifts on its axis as Donald Trump takes power, becoming the 47th as well as the 45th president of the United States. Alan Friedman is an American journalist and the author of a new book, The End of America, a guide to the new world disorder. And he joins me now. Alan, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
So, look, you argue we're moving into what you call the new world disorder. Tell us a bit about that, because it doesn't sound super.
Well, no, it's going to be a 10 or 20-year period of conflict and uncertainty, and most of all, the end of the old liberal world order that we knew since the Second World War. And my book explains how not only American presidents have made mistakes, like George W. Bush's imperial overreach, his disastrous wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, or Obama's mishandling of the Arab Spring, or Trump's dismantling of the multilateral system in the first 4 years in office. But I'm looking at how Trump will validate and embolden Putin and Xi and other dictators and transform America from a regular democracy into a more illiberal democracy, where the White House will try to control the press freedoms, and the media, where propaganda pro-Trump will be on Elon Musk's Twitter, on Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook and Instagram, and on TikTok after the deal that Trump seems to be making with the Chinese. So we're looking at a world where Trump has an autocratic behavior, but when he says things that sound crazy, like I'm going to use military force against Denmark to take over Greenland, or Canada should be part of our country, or I'm going to take back the Panama Canal, it's easy to dismiss that. But what we're looking at is an American president who shows he has no respect for international law. He believes that a sovereign country like America, if they're powerful enough, can take over another piece of territory. And that ends up legitimizing Vladimir Putin in the Ukraine and Crimea. So what Trump is going to do is dress up a peace agreement with Ukraine that is really a victory for Putin, who gets to keep what he's taken. As Trump increasingly does transactional foreign policy, basing his power in Washington on a billionaire oligarchy from Silicon Valley, he will be able, I think, to delegitimize American leadership even more, contribute to the end of American leadership in the world, and take us into a world where, shall we say, might makes right,
Sure.
or there'll be the law of the jungle more than international laws and norms as we've known them.
So, look, there's a lot to unpack in that. But first up, does this mean we're going to be entering a world without leaders, without global leaders, or are there just going to be different leaders?
Well, America will remain the military power in the world predominantly for another 20 or 30 years, until mid-century, till 2050, America's military power. China will catch up by the middle of the century. China will overtake America as the world's largest economy in about 5 years, in the early 2030s. But America is no longer to assert itself. It's no longer respected. And if Trump treats his European allies, and even Britain and the Prime Minister of Britain, remember, when Elon Musk attacks Keir Starmer, that's Donald Trump attacking Keir Starmer. Remember, you have an American president who is a convicted felon who has no sense of international law. They're going to change a lot, not for the better, and there'll be a tsunami of right-wing populism empowered across Europe. Germany will see the neo-Nazis, who are Trump's friends, invited to his inauguration, the neo-Nazi Alternative for Deutschland, possibly joining the government. Le Pen is empowered in France, Meloni in Italy. This is what Trump wants. He wants a right-wing, populist, illiberal democracy based on the style of Viktor Orban. And that may sound crazy today, but check back in 6 months and let's see if Trump is cracking down on press freedoms or prosecuting his enemies or limiting the power of the courts, or ramming through anti-democratic measures, because that's what we're facing in America, and I can't say it often enough.
I mean, the paradox here is that Trump and his supporters obviously believe that they're not doing that. Trump and his supporters believe that they are boosting American standing and prestige across the world at a time when it has diminished. At least, I mean, that's what they say. Do you think that's a dishonest stance? Do you think they're simply wrong? Or do you think there's a chance that they might, in fact, be right? And America, as you say, will remain the preeminent power in the world for quite a long time, will exercise global leadership. It just might not be a leadership that you like very much.
Well, if America behaves like a rogue state, then what America is basically doing is ceding parts of its power to other rogue states. And what Trump did in his first term was to withdraw from Syria and let the Russians move into U.S. bases. What Trump does seems like imperialism, a new kind of imperialism, but it's really him just doing business deals, making money. Trump is driven by money more than by military strategy. American leadership will decline, in my opinion, simply because the more Trump allows dictators to have their way, the less the U.S. will speak of a rules-based system or a set of U.S. moral imperatives. Remember, America for decades has claimed moral superiority, that there's American exceptionalism, that we are the indispensable nation, that we guarantee stability. If a U.S. president simply says, no, I just want to do deals wherever I can, and I don't care who I do them with, then we are no longer that American experiment that is nearing 250 years of age, but we're just another illiberal democracy. My real fear is that America becomes Orbanized, that it takes on the look of Hungary, and you can do that in 4 years.
Where does this leave the European Union? Because, I mean, there are optimists would say that perhaps this is the point at which the European Union, bands together more tightly, becomes this sort of counterbalancing force in the world, is less reliant on the United States, needs to be in charge of its own defense, particularly looking towards the east, towards Russia, that this could have a galvanizing impact on the European Union. There aren't a lot of people who think that, but some do. What do you think?
My analysis is that there is a lot of goodwill in the European Commission to do that, and there are a number of French and German visionaries who would like to see a common European defense force, but the reality is that 27 nations can't get it together. There are at least 3 European Union members that are currently basically apologists for Putin, starting with Orban in Hungary, including the Serbian president, including Slovakia. 3 countries that really take the anti-Europe, anti-NATO line and side with Russia. And also, Europe needs Britain. I sincerely hope that Keir Starmer or somebody will take Britain back into the European Union, where it belongs, and get over this Brexit nonsense, which has only hurt your economy. And that will happen in a few years. I still think Britain, Germany, and France can band together to try to help Ukraine if Trump cuts off aid, but I don't think Europe will get its act together in any way to be relevant. Europe is impotent.
I mean, I don't see many commentators here who predict a return to the European Union anytime soon.
That's a wishful thinking.
Look, you've actually met and interviewed Donald Trump. How was that experience?
Yes.
What's he like in person?
Well, Donald Trump is very charming if he thinks that you're one of his boys, if he thinks you're on his side.
I'm sensing he didn't think that about you.
No, he did, because I went in recommended by somebody he trusted, and I smiled, and I complimented him on the gold taps in his bathrooms on his airplane, and he showed me the gold plated buckles on his seatbelts. And he was very charming, and I was doing an interview for the Sunday Times, actually. So no, Trump thought I was a friend. When I wrote my book later, he realized I was not a friend, that I'm a journalist.
You've also interviewed Vladimir Putin. How do the two men compare in person?
Vladimir Putin is a far more complex individual than Donald Trump. Vladimir Putin has an enormous and tough self-control that he exerts when you're in his presence, and he tries to make himself look humble. And but he has nervous tics. He fiddles with his tie. He fiddles with his earpiece. His body language is squat with his legs out front and arms almost crossed. Vladimir Putin is a very complex psychological profile. When I went to see him, he was very cold for the first few minutes. I said, "Hi, Mr. Putin, I'm Alan Friedman," and he was very cold until 5 minutes into our conversation. I said, "By the way, I have regards for you from your friend Silvio Berlusconi." And when I said that, Putin smiled and almost giggled and started talking about the white truffles and tagliolini he'd eaten at Berlusconi's house in Milan. And so all of this shows, and I've had this experience as a journalist around the world, if you're interviewing, whether they're dictators or oligarchs or presidents, if they think that they can trust you and that you're not going to betray them, then they think you're inside the tent. It's a very interesting psychology.
Yeah. Well, look, before I let you go, if I can turn just back to the US, I want to tell us about your vision for the sort of domestic situation in the US over the next few years, indeed the next few decades, because you paint a picture of an increasingly illiberal state with increasing sort of repressions on free speech and so on, which is of course,
and the courts
and the courts as well, which is of course entirely counter to how the people at the forefront of this would portray themselves, what they are doing. Do you see a potential for pushback in the United States, violent pushback in the United States? Do you see a potential for civil disorder in the United States?
American society is so polarized and divided that there is the potential for what I would call low-density conflict, yes. Especially if the mass deportations that begin tomorrow really unfairly arrest many people. I think he'll fail to deport millions of people. That's just part of his show, I believe. I hope that it won't really become a mass deportation the way he's describing it. I think you have to analyze it in terms of the economic policy and the social policy. In terms of the economy, the billionaires in Wall Street, the banks, the corporations are opening the champagne because it's clear that with continued tax cuts, more tax cuts, deregulation, that if you're on Wall Street and you invest in defense stocks or oil stocks or high-tech artificial intelligence stocks or social media stocks, you're going to make money with Trump for at least 6 or 7 or maybe 9 or 10 months, because there's going to be this big Wall Street roar in which Trump satisfies the rich class. In America, to pay for those tax cuts, Trump is going to have to cut Social Security, our pension system. He's going to have to cut into that little bit of, we don't have a national health system, but what we have in Medicare. He's going to have to cut back and punish the very lower middle class workers who voted for him, who may feel betrayed or may not have the intellectual capacity to even understand that they've been betrayed because they're conspiracy theorists. So what you have in America is half of America loves Trump, either because they're poorly educated or because they're cynical and they don't care what he does with civil rights or gays or transsexuals, as long as he cuts the taxes and helps Wall Street to soar. That's where we're going in the short term. In a year or so, if he does trade protection, we go to inflation, higher unemployment, and slower growth because his policies are a guaranteed boomerang. I hope he doesn't pursue his real economic policies.
Alan Friedman, thank you very much indeed. Great to speak to you. And Alan is the author of The End of America, A Guide to the New World Disorder.